All right, we'll pick up with part two of our conversation with Michael Mechanic, senior editor at Mother Jones and author of the new book, Jackpot, How the Super Rich Really Live and How Their Wealth Harms Us All. So why don't we pick up right there? We talked a little bit about how the super rich really live. How does their wealth harm us all? To unfairly ask you to boil down your book, or about half of it, maybe more than half, to one answer.
Yeah, well, harms us all means it harms the people who have the money, and it harms society at large. Obviously, we're not talking about there are individuals who are going to be, they're going to be healthy and happy and flourishing because of their wealth. I'm not saying wealth is not going to improve your state of mind in some ways, but it also can do the opposite. When you talk to some of these super rich people, I mean, one of the problems you have here is that all the studies of happiness and so forth, you don't get super wealthy people participating in research. So it's on a gradient. So they can look, there's what's called a satiation point where you kind of hit peak life satisfaction pretty much once your basic needs are taken care of. You can live a comfortable life without too much worry, save any extraordinary circumstances. So it's kind of like upper middle class, right? When you get beyond that, and what happens is people, well, there's sort of there is the sort of keeping up with the Joneses. People move to the nicer place. They have more money coming in and out. They have more people in their lives. They have less time. They're working like crazy hours to maintain this lifestyle. And that happens a lot. I mean, I had this, I think I mentioned before, a friend of mine who got very wealthy, and he told me he didn't much like the work he was doing. He said, I really, it's boring. It's not satisfying. He said, but look, we're sitting in this house. Look what I have. It's like, I don't want to give this up. So like he keeps doing the job he dislikes to keep that up. Yeah. There's a guy in the book named Doug Holliday, who he's an interesting guy, pretty accomplished guy. And now what he does, he has a nonprofit called Path North, in which he takes CEOs and senators and very prominent, very wealthy men on these sort of self-actualization tours. It's sort of like posh self-realization, hedge fund managers, all these folks. And he says, a lot of these folks have spent their entire life chasing a branding themselves like on this track to success. And a lot of them are just really kind of miserable. And I heard that numerous times. You hear this, billionaires are miserable. I saw Tony Robbins speak. I didn't put that in the book, but one of the things he said, every billionaire I know is miserable. And he hangs out with all of these billionaires. I also heard it from a reporter I talked to who she had met Malcolm Forbes. And she said, yeah, he was miserable. He said he hated his children. When you have a lot of money in the mix, you could have these problems with relationships, these problems of knowing who you can trust. People come to you always wanting something. Somebody approaches you in friendship. Is this really friendship, or does this person just sort of want to be near me, be part of my circle for their own street cred or whatever? There's a lot of things that come into play, and we also, like I said, we sequester ourselves, and the richer we are, the more we want to move into these little worlds of smaller and smaller bubbles within bubbles, where you go to the party and everybody's talking about their private equity play and their private jet and their new, Aspen house. And you kind of lose touch with what is really going on in the society, in the world, things that, need to be worried about. It's when we pursue self-interest in general. That's sort of the way this country is, the way people are, maybe in general. And when you pursue self-interest at all costs, you end up with great divisions and lack of understanding for others. And I think we see some of this in all this political mayhem we've had. It's just people can't even talk to each other anymore. The CEO doesn't ever get close to his low-level employees. They don't live in the same communities. They don't see the same things. They don't see the same, they have different kinds of struggles, different kinds of pain. And both of them are valid, but when you have a lot of money, you can take care of your struggles a little bit better. It's just that, it says like the money does not, as far as the harm it does to the wealthy, like I said, it can tear apart the fabric of your life and decrease your satisfaction in life if you're chasing that. But it also drives us apart as a society, and that affects everybody. So I guess that's sort of what I'm trying to get at. And there's also just, an unfairness baked into a lot of the laws that we put in place. And when we fail to really understand that, I don't think it bodes well for our social fabric.
So if I cynically wanted to take much of what you just said and say that it's shared by, or could also have been said by, let's call a hypothetical populist conservative, would that be unfair? Or is that, the discontent with there's some populist conservatives out there who are talking about market fundamentalism, it struck me as much of what you just said there could have been uttered by, thought by people who would be fairly labeled as populist conservatives.
I don't think it's, when I'm sort of not into categorizing so much as like looking at individual ideas.
Yeah.
I mean, I can, one of my best friends in college was a conservative evangelical Christian, very different from my world and mindset, but we had great conversations, and he was a fabulous person. And I mean, I fear that we can't talk like that anymore because we get in our silos and we think everybody else is the bad guy. And this is, our politicians are encouraging this behavior. And so we're just so polarized now that we can, like I said, we can hardly talk to each other. And so it's nice when you meet somebody, you really, you meet somebody who's not like you politically or ideologically, and you realize, you like them. So.
Yeah. Is philanthropy too polarized, I'll say?
Is philanthropy polarized? Well, philanthropy, I think philanthropy plays an important role in filling in the gaps that the government can't fill, but it's not meant, it shouldn't be a replacement. And, this is something you hear a lot actually from wealthy people that say, well, I want to give my money, I don't want to decide where my money goes because the government is a lousy charity. Like it's not, but the government isn't a charity. It has a different function, completely different function. And part of that is to just make sure that things don't get as out of whack as they are now, frankly, to be as equitable as possible, to help the people who really need help and to help people make their lives better. And, of course, some philanthropists are trying to do the same thing, but, like the Darren Walker thing is, we should be making ourselves less necessary. And I agree with that. It's like there's no reason that philanthropy, I mean, yes, some philanthropy will always be needed, but we shouldn't need so much of it, and it shouldn't play the role that it is playing now, where basically government is starved of funds, and so then the wealthy people have to come in and save us. I mean, let's talk about education for a second, because there's a kind of an example that you can see, right? Well, first of all, should private schools be charities? Should you be able to take a charitable deduction to give money to your private school when you are basically, private schools essentially perpetuate inequality because well, they do. The rich kids have a superior education. I mean, these schools are really educationally top-notch, great facilities, great teachers, well-resourced. And then you got the public schools who are barely scraping by and have to beg their parents for donations. So please bring us Kleenex, please bring chalk, because they've been cut back so badly. So, okay, but that's one question. Another question is, so what happens when you have public schools that are unequal? You have the Ross School Foundation, you have the Woodside School Foundation. These are foundations that are set up to fund public schools in a particular area. And I think the Woodside in particular, that they have a massive, massive amount of money coming in. And so they can make their public schools the quality of a private school. But only if you have money to live in Woodside can you take advantage of that. So it's sort of like you're funding this very exclusive educational system within the public school system. And because you're taking charitable deductions on that money, the poor communities are subsidizing the rich ones, which doesn't make a lot of sense to them.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's philanthropy, it plays a role and it can be really good, but I think it was allowed to evolve in this nation without much forethought. And the way I described in the book how these foundations came about, and Congress sort of abdicating their role in overseeing them. And now foundations, there are some foundations doing great stuff. There's some doing really sketchy stuff, frankly, or that exist solely to kind of as a perk for the family, or a way for them to, of a business proposition in a way.
Yeah. Is philanthropy too, having asked you if it's polarized, is it too politicized? If philanthropy is supposed to be doing charity, whether on the way to eliminating itself or not, is it involved too much in, and I mean here, partisan politics? This is the way it's seen by many. And is that a problem? I guess I'll leave it at that for a minute. And then I want to hold Darren Walker against you. So I'll merge the questions. Who might think that a lot of what Ford does has the effect of politicizing voting? You wanted to equate philanthropy with charity before it did. What about if it becomes too politicized or political outright? Is that a bad thing? Would that even?
Well, I kind of see what's coming here, right?
Yeah.
What do you say about Darren Walker? Well, I mean, I think the tricky thing is that charities are not supposed to be, like, nonprofits are not supposed to be overtly political. I mean, like, for instance, it's illegal for Mother Jones to endorse a candidate. We have a foundation. It's a foundation supported publication, and we don't. And that's not the point. We actually hold Democrats to account. We hold Republicans to account. We might criticize the crazy things the Republicans are doing right now because it's objectively crazy. But that's getting off the topic. But I think about like the Koch brothers and the Americans for Prosperity. I mean, they are doing a lot of politics in the guise of charity, but it's like called education, right? So they're doing a lot of sort of political manipulation and spreading political ideology. But I mean, it's free speech. I guess you can do that, but I kind of wonder whether such things should be subsidized by the public.
So do many. Those who, of course, would say, as you would predict, I would say that happens the other way too, and maybe.
Right. So you want to talk about Darren Walker? I mean, well,
and others, and I think it might outnumber the Kochs, but that we can't get into now. But if politicization of philanthropy, of charity, is bad, shouldn't it be for everyone? If wealth harms us, I mean, I guess I want you to concede that one that's done on the left too. We don't have to talk about whether it's done more, but there are some who would say, get rid of the exemption, then we don't have to worry about this. Pay full freight for your politics if you want.
I think that's right. I think people should. It's fine to, if you want to put your money where you want to put it, that's great. But why should everyone else pay for it? I actually think the way to go, if I was a policymaker, would be to give a break to really small time donors, people who make under 100 grand a year, and not give a charitable break to the big philanthropists. It's like, why? They don't need the break.
Yeah.
And they certainly don't need the public subsidizing their giving, because I mean, that's, of course, that's another criticism of big philanthropy, is that it's just incredibly undemocratic.
Yeah.
It gives outsized influence to people with vast sums of money to make decisions that are matters of public interest, but with no public input.
Right. Okay. I mean, that's heartening. So is there potential for an alliance there? I mean, neither of us can speak for either side and wouldn't, but why wouldn't there be potential for a more universal reaction against what's being done by big philanthropy in the area?
I think there could be.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. There should be a big conference, but I think, government has to get interested in this, because you have to lay down some ground rules for what constitutes a charity. Should there be some kind of tax break? At what level would the tax break come in? These things should be really thought through and debated. And I think it would be hard to do in this partisan atmosphere to debate anything, let alone like this complex thing. And you are going to have people who, they're wonderful people doing philanthropy, well-meaning, the best of intentions, the best of motivations. But then, I'm reading the book about the Sacklers, Empire of Pain, right now. And that family very, very much saw philanthropy as a business proposition. It was like, what's in it for us? How can we pledge this money and somehow end up making more money than we pledged in the first place? There was a lot of that kind of stuff that they did.
What has surprised you, if anything? We'll finish here with one or two about the reaction to the book. And has it differed among worldviews or wealth levels?
It was interesting, because when I read your review, you have, some people saw it that way. Some people said, I really was into the beginning of the book, where it's more lifestyles of the rich and famous, and then he kind of went off in this other realm, which, I tried to keep it kind of character driven all through, but there were some parts that were, a little bit more. I had to get into the nuts and bolts. But then some people, exactly the opposite. I wish the whole book had been like the second part of the book.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole idea was this supposed to be a journey, like to take the wealth fantasy and ride it out from the jackpot moment to what might you do with this newfound wealth? Like, what are the fun things you could do? What are the bizarre opportunities for consumption and lifestyle and upgrades? And then it kind of gets in, what are the responsibilities? Like, who are all these weird financial people, these people in suits I have to deal with now? And like, what is this they're offering me? And how do I make these decisions around, weird and, alternative investments and so forth? And then so it was like, for anyone who had ever thought about getting rich quick or like wanting that. And as I pointed out, there's a survey of college freshmen from the class of 2021, 120,000 kids, there was actually more than that, they reduced it. And they gave this whole list of sort of big life ambitions. How would you rate this as important or very important or essential or not important? And it would be like becoming a leader in your community, starting a successful business, making great works of art, like finding like religious meaning. I mean, having a great family. I mean, there were just sort of these big ambitions, and one of them was being very well off financially. That was the number one choice for these kids. Yeah. More than 80% of them said that was it was very important or essential to be very well off financially. Mm-hmm. And I think that shows you the mindset of people. Like there's a fear, I think. There's a fear of being on the wrong side of the economic divide in this country because it's so stark. You see, like, it's really like winners and losers. It's almost bipolar that way. And it's true. It's like you look at wealth ownership in this country, the bottom half owns very little. The bottom 40% collectively owns nothing at all. Nothing. Zero. And that's because the bottom quarter is in debt. So yeah. So we live in this, things have gotten so polarized that we live in sort of a fear that we're gonna fall behind.
Yeah.
And I think that's a problem because you really want a thriving middle. And I think the thriving middle is what lifts all boats. It's good for the rich, it's good for the poor, you know.
Do you have a next book in mind?
Uh,
You or next article?
I'm just recovering. I'm just
Yeah.
recovering.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I actually thought about, remember the guy in the book, Sal Kravinsky, who gave away his $45 million and then his kidney.
Yes.
He might be an interesting subject for a book.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Okay.
There's so many things to write about.
Yeah.
The question is, could I get a good advance?
Well, yeah. Well, that's you got to pay the light bill, right? Okay.
Exactly.
All right. Well, thanks so much. Why don't we finish it up there? I totally appreciate your, giving us the time, Michael Mechanic.
You're absolutely welcome.
Thanks so much.